Um, Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us today for this important panel discussion on sustainable agriculture and smart proteins, synergies in the Indian context, jointly curated by UNEP India and GFI India. I would like to apologize for the slight delay to our panelists as well as to the audience. Thank you so much for having patience. I, Arghadeep Saha, Policy Manager at Good Food Institute India, I'm honored to be your moderator for this unique and timely conversation that links India's agricultural strengths with the country's potential to emerge as a key node in the global supply chain of alternative proteins. Alternative proteins, or smart proteins as they are known more commonly in India, are an emerging food technology that can play a leading role in the global protein transition by reducing food system emissions while also freeing up considerable natural resources like land, water for additional climate mitigation benefits, food security, and for protection of biodiversity. As most of us already know, food systems are a major contributor, modern food systems, rather, I should say, are a major contributor to greenhouse gas emissions. And calculations have shown that they can roughly amount to about 30%, or rather one third of the total emissions. These emissions lead to more frequent extreme weather conditions that causes loss in harvests that affect food supplies around the world. This discussion that we are having today is also timely from the perspective of the fact that COP28, the leading event around climate change, just started yesterday. It's a 2 week event. This is the first time that food and agricultural systems
Sure.
is getting a dedicated day at COP. And it shows that global leaders have now begun to acknowledge the importance of sustainable food systems in achieving the Paris Climate Agreement. Before we delve into our discussion, I would like to briefly introduce distinguished panelists who make up this very interesting and diverse panel. We have Dr. Niloo Srivastava, Principal Scientific Officer at the Department of Biotechnology, Government of India, with a PhD in molecular biology from the Banaras Hindu University and a postdoctoral stint at Jawaharlal Nehru University. She has been a driving force on multiple initiatives in over her 13 years of service in the department. This includes the stem cells and regenerative medicine program, where she initiated the much needed CAR T therapy program in India. She also worked for the biodesign program of the department and now drives the chronic diseases program. Currently, among other things, she's also spearheading the Smart Protein Initiative at the Department of Biotechnology. We have with us Dr. Saikat Mazumdar, who is the cluster leader for nutrition, dietary behavior, and smart food. And he also serves as the Chief Operations Officer at ICRISAT Hyderabad. Dr. Mazumdar has a degree in food science and technology from the Central Food Technological Research Institute, CFTRI, which is more commonly known, at Mysore, and was awarded a PhD by the Philipps University Marburg in Germany in 2008. He also has a specialization in food and agribusiness management from the College of Agriculture and Life Sciences, Cornell University. At ICRISAT, he is involved in providing support to the entrepreneurs in the areas of food and agribusiness, research and development in the area of nutraceuticals, fortified foods, and food safety. This includes nutritional intervention projects towards addressing malnutrition and enhancement of dietary diversity among tribal populations in India and Africa. We also have with us, I'm hoping Dr. Kunwar Singh has managed to join. Um, we also have with us Dr. Kunwar Singh, who completed his graduation and master's from Chandrasekhar Azad University of Agriculture and Technology, Kanpur, in 1987 and 1990, respectively, and obtained his doctorate in plant breeding from GB Pant University of Agriculture and Technology in 1995. He joined ICAR Directorate of Rapeseed Mustard Research in 1997 as a scientist and has worked for over 25 years on oilseed brassica improvement. He has been awarded the Rajiv Gandhi National Award for original book writing in Hindi on Gyan Vigyan for the year 2013 from the Ministry of Home Affairs, among many other awards for his consistent and quality research on oilseeds. He has to his credit over 160 publications, including research papers, books, technical bulletins, and abstracts in seminars and symposiums. Currently, he's leading as director of ICAR Indian Institute of Soybean Research. We have also with us Mr. Vinay Singh, who is the National Project Manager and Food Security Expert and Food and Agricultural Organizations FAO of the United Nations, where he leads projects and technical support in the areas such as nutrition sensitive agriculture, food security, food safety, hygiene, and nutrition in India. He has facilitated several FAO technical workshops for nutrition sensitive agriculture and food systems at the national and international level. Vinay has previously worked in various capacities on different initiatives around nutrition and agriculture in India with the World Bank, CARE, and FP. He oversaw the design and implementation of a World Bank supported multi-sectoral nutrition convergence program, which was further scaled up and across the country by the Ministry of Rural Development's flagship National Rural Livelihood Mission. From UNEP, we have Mr. Reuben Gergan, who is the project officer for TEEP at the UNEP India office and is currently coordinating the implementation of UNEP's flagship TEEP Agri-Food Initiative in 3 states of India, Uttar Pradesh, Uttarakhand, and Assam. The project is evaluating the socio-economic and environmental benefits of scaling organic farming and agroforestry interventions in 3 states. He's also supporting the UNEP India office on the implementation of the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration. Reuben has an extensive profile of qualification. He has degrees in environmental studies and resource management, mechanical and aerospace engineering, and physics from Terry, Cornell University, and Ithaca College. Reuben has been actively involved with several development forums, especially relating to sustainable mountain development. We are also joined by industry representatives. We have Mr. Ashish, who is the co-founder of Proeon, a food ingredients innovation company working on creating healthier, tastier, and more sustainable food solutions. Proeon creates high-quality plant protein ingredients with superior nutritional, functional, and sensory profiles through intensive R&D. Proeon is at the forefront of disrupting the alternative protein space through their plant-based protein ingredients. Proeon's innovation has led them to be a part of prestigious global forums such as Technology Pioneers 2022, Cohort by the World Economic Forum, Mass Challenge Switzerland 2021, and Food Tech Studio Bytes by Scrum Ventures. An alumnus of ISB Hyderabad and BITS Pilani, Ashish comes with over 15 years of experience across pharmaceutical, nutraceutical, and food and beverage industries, both in India as well as globally. Mr. Prasad Nair is the head of strategic alliances and partnerships at String Bio, a pioneering company in the business of manufacturing raw materials for animal nutrition, agriculture, and human nutrition sectors that are derived using sustainable and traceable processes, leveraging advances in synthetic biology, fermentation, technology, chemistry, and process engineering. With over 25 years of experience, Prasad possesses a strong background in strategy implementation, planning, and business development. Through his contributions is the Boston Consulting Group, Novozymes, and Iosynth Labs. At String Bio, Mr. Prasad drives the strategic partnerships and alliances to take their products to the market. Our panel today is also nicely rounded off by the presence of Mr. Aadil Chitalwala, Senior Associate from the impact investment firm Peak Ventures. Peak identifies and invests in purpose-driven entrepreneurs looking to make a difference in the world and shape humanity's collective future. The firm has been deeply involved in sustainability investing for almost a decade and has invested in solutions with the potential to be most compelling and impactful at scale. At Peak, others are involved in investment evaluation, sector research, sourcing, and partnerships. He focuses on food systems, alternative proteins, clean energy, and water. Aadil holds an MBA from Columbia University. A big welcome to all our panelists. Who are audiences, I would like to let you know that we'll have some time at the end for the Q&A. So please feel free to drop your questions in the Q&A section and we will get to them at the end of the panel. Please also mention who is the panelist you're directing your question to. If I could just start the panel with a few thoughts as we begin this very interesting discussion. I think we all understand and kind of realize that agriculture continues to be a key employer in the Indian economy, although its share of GDP over the decades has been consistently declining, from accounting about 47-48% in 1960-61. Agriculture now contributes about 15 to 18% of our GDP in 22-23. However, the share of people who are employed in the sector continues to be somewhere around 50%. India continues to have a predominantly smallholder agricultural system and is highly vulnerable to climate change. The IPCC's AR6th assessment report released in 2022 highlighted the adverse impact on the availability and prices of food, exacerbating the undernourishment in Southern Asian region. The Global Climate Risk Index, which also annually publishes sort of an index on the vulnerability of countries to climate change, has been consistently placing India in the top 10 geographies that are most susceptible to climate change after effects. And this would include effects on crop production, on productivity that could affect local food supply chains and have negative impacts on rural incomes and poverty. Alternative proteins, as most of our panelists already know, are a new and innovative category of food that intends to mimic the taste, texture, and sensory perceptions associated with typically animal derived proteins. Smart proteins are typically made through three different modalities: plant based proteins, where proteins extracted from plants are texturized to create such products. We have cultivated meat, where cell lines from actual animals are cultivated in controlled growth environments that triggers these immature cells to differentiate into skeletal muscle, fat, and connective tissues, similar to like a real actual meat product. And we then have biomass fermentation that uses the rapid growth of microorganisms to efficiently make large amounts of protein-rich food from food stocks that could include agricultural byproducts and waste as feed for those microorganisms. And then within fermentation, we have technology which is precision fermentation that uses certain specific microorganisms to produce specific functional ingredients. They could be color, they could be enzymes, they could be vitamins, they could be pigments, which could be used as additives in existing alternative protein products to enhance their taste, texture, and sensory profile. For a low middle income country like India, with such large, vast agrarian resources and a thriving bioprocessing industry, there's tremendous potential for the country to emerge as a key player in the supply chain for alternative proteins, given the rising concerns of industrial livestock farming and the sustainably high consumption levels of meat in the developed world. With that, I would like to start by going to Mr. Reuben. Reuben, you have been part of the environment and agri sector for quite some time, right? Most recently, you have been leading the TEEB Agri-Food Project for UNEP India, which is working on developing and valuation of sustainability interventions in agriculture and food systems. Based on your experience, what has been your reading of Indian agriculture's susceptibility to climate change? How vulnerable is the sector, and what are some of the major problems facing our smallholder farmers?
Sure. Thanks, Arghadeep, for your question. And I think in answering your question, like to talk not only about the vulnerability of the agriculture sector, but all to climate change, but also the contributions of the agriculture sector to climate change. So there is the two sides of the coin that we're actually kind of looking at. So as you know, most of us are very well aware, climate is the most important determinant in terms of crop productivity, and particularly in a country like India, where you have two-thirds of your area that is under rain-fed agriculture, and then about 86% of your farmers as marginal or small farmers. Climate change has very large implications, whether they be directly or indirectly. And there have been extensive studies, and we have enough scientists here on our panel today that show how climate change has manifested in several ways, whether it be in terms of increased rainfall, shifting cropping seasons and growing seasons, whether it be the frequency of sudden or slow onset events. These are actually increasing. And then the Ministry of Agriculture and Farmers Welfare, if you look through their data from 2015 onwards till to 2021, you see that about 33.9 million hectares of cropped area have been lost due to floods, and also excess rainfalls, and then also about 35 million hectares has been lost due to drought. So this is not only going to deter food security and nutrition, but it also kind of heightens the socioeconomic sort of vulnerability or the stability of rural economies. And as you had just pointed out, how livelihoods is very much, I think it's about 1.3 billion people in directly or indirectly are, kind of associated with the agriculture sector here. So these are going to have issues in terms of losses of farm revenue. I think the economic survey in 2018 they predicted a loss of about 12% of revenue in the Kharif season and about 6% for the winter season, and more impact on rain-fed agriculture areas. So we've been working in Uttar Pradesh, Uttarakhand, and Assam, and under the Team Agri-Food Initiative in India, valuing the different sort of ecosystem services, making a case for sustainable agriculture. But some of these issues around climate change are very apparent. For example, in Uttarakhand, you have a growing concern with out migration from the state and the growing number of ghost villages and abandonment of these areas just because of the loss of productivity shifts in the and the growing areas within the state, and also farm livelihoods within the state have become less remunerable for them. So you're seeing a lot of migration happening, and more sort of pressures in urban centers in the state as well. Besides that, we've been also studying pests and diseases, and this is also very apparent that a lot of the small marginal farmers do not have access um, to a lot of these pesticides. The number of these cases have also been increasing, at least in the areas of study that we're undertaking. We're seeing a lot of these issues also cropping up. So there's also a statistic that I would like to bring about that from the 1960s to the 2010s, we've seen insect pests increase from 7.2 crop losses due to insect pests that have increased from 7.2% to about 16.8% in the 2010s. And if you go back to the livestock sector, you're seeing thermal stresses also impacting the livestock sector significantly. There was a study that has been carried out in the Trans Gangetic and the Upper Gangetic Plains area, and basically the study kind of confirms that you're going to have about a loss of about 12 billion rupees annually up to 2029 due to reduction in milk yield because of thermal stress, and then that'll be doubled in the next decade over. So you are seeing a lot of these sort of changes happening because of climate change. What is important to note is that in India, because of the different sort of geographical landscapes and the diverse agroclimatic settings, we need to start thinking about location specific sort of solutions. And agriculture itself, being vulnerable to climate change, it is also a large contributor to climate change. About MOFCC in their reports, they project they've basically reported that the agriculture sector in India contributes about 16% to the total greenhouse gas emissions. And here, a lot of it is through enteric fermentation. I think 54% of it is through enteric fermentation. And then you have also losses, emissions from agriculture soils, rice cultivation, and also manure management and crop residue burning. But what I want to basically say is there's not only one pathway in terms of ensuring sustainability of food systems. We have to look at different alternatives, and also looking at smart proteins as an alternative. Alternative is an important thing to do here. The Indian G20 presidency has very much emphasized that as well, a transformation towards resilient and sustainable agriculture. And there is a lot more collaboration required among countries, as well as solutions that are required to kind of address these. So yeah, with that, I'll pass it back to you. Yeah.
Thanks, Reuben. That was a very insightful and very detailed response. Thanks for starting off with that.
Yeah.
Continuing from what Reuben said, I think I would just like to quickly go to Dr. Kunwar Singh. Dr. Kunwar is someone who has been working in the space of agricultural research for many years now. Given the challenges that Reuben just very succinctly explained, what have been some of the challenges that you have experienced firsthand in terms of promoting sustainable practices, progressive practices among Indian farmers? I mean, what are some of the barriers preventing them from more environment friendly and I would say uh, practices that kind of, to some extent, protect them from these impacts of climate change? Where have farmers struggled to adopt such practices?
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Saha, and also to the entire team for inviting me. Regarding your question, adoption of these sustainable practices. If you see the Indian scenario of farmers, the most of the farmer majority is of the marginal farmers
Yeah,
who have very small land holdings. It may be less than 0.7 hectare area. So in these conditions, you can think of that there is a lot of problems associated with. The most important thing which I have come to experience with the people is the lack of knowledge. Many times they are not particularly aware what kind of technology is available to resilient this climate changes. And even then, if they have the knowledge from somewhere, they do not have the availability of inputs. You see, we have seen that many of the farmers, we have even trying to convince them that these are the technology, these are the different kind of varieties and seeds available. Still, because they are not available, they don't have the access to these inputs. So they can't go there, they can't adopt that kind of technology. Simultaneously, they are also driven by their immediate needs. If you see the small farmer, they don't want to go only on the one type of crops. They want to grow the different kind of crops, the different kind of technology, just because they have to survive, they have to fulfill their livelihood on that. So in that way, these are the many kind of situation, and then their top priority is the market. For example, we have been trying to expand this soybean crop in northeastern states and some other parts of the country. And many times we face the problem that there is no market. There is no taker of the produce. You see, in my past institute, when I was working in some other crop, we tried to put that Bresca crop to the southern part of the country. The people were convinced with the quality of the oil and other products, but there was no market, there was no expellers. So whenever we have a kind of technology, we want to get it expanded to some of the area, we have to go simultaneously with all these uh, things, particularly what kind of trainings, demonstrations we can convince them. Then availability of the inputs. Whenever we go with the technology, we should go with the inputs as well. And then simultaneously create the market demand. So that is the most important. You see the farmers here only. I am nowadays in this central India, Indore. This is the hub of industry. So there is a lot of demand for the products which are coming from the soybean or from different other crops also. So that has been the reason that why this crop particularly got popularized in this region. Otherwise, there are many other regions in the country where the yield potential are much more. So we have to think all at that time that all the technology which are remunerative, where the market is there, inputs are available in that region, and then the farmers' basic needs. So these are the factors which I think are very important whenever we want to popularize the sustainable practices. Thank you very much. This is my response for this.
Thank you, Dr. Singh. Very I would say, very on grounded insights. Clearly, it's very clear that this is coming from your years of experience, of spending so much time with our smallholder farmers on the ground. Uh, if I could just go to Dr. Saikat, sir, you have been a veteran in the agriculture and nutrition sector, and as part of leading the NutriPlus knowledge program at ECRISAT. I'm sure you have deep insights into how the agriculture sector has a big role to play in ensuring nutritional security in a country like India. Do you feel, and I'm borrowing some things from what Reuben and Dr. Singh also said, do you feel the push for a monocropping system around rice and wheat shares some of the blame for the situation the agriculture sector is facing? Why have climate resilient crops like millets, pulses, and even soybean, for example, not had, I would say, even a quarter of the boom that rice and wheat production experienced? I'm sure, I mean, they have gone up, but it's nowhere near comparable to what has happened with rice and wheat production in the country.
Yeah, thank you so much. And yeah, I do agree with the background which has been given. See, at this moment, if you look at the Green Revolution which happened, and beyond that, of course, we leveraged on rice and wheat and the technologies. But beyond that, I think the cropping system definitely is something which has been established. But then there were certain policy interventions which were taken, or policies which were adopted, which promoted mostly rice and wheat, and the other crops were sort of neglected. And that's where a lot of behavioral change came in, where traditionally when millets were being consumed, and people started shifting away from that. As part of our studies, we do visit the villages and we try to understand what went wrong. And then mostly it is attributed to this availability of rice and wheat at very sort of affordable prices to the PDS, which contributed to people shifting away from actually consuming those traditional millets. In fact, I did visit some of the villages in Telangana where the elderly people still have the germplasm collection collected and kept and saved, but they say we are no longer growing them. And the reason is that nobody consumes them. And also, to share an interesting anecdote, we did try to visit one of the households and try to understand how a millet roti was being made. And interestingly, we found that the the elderly person in the house was the one who was actually making the roti, and not the the daughter or the daughter-in-law, because they have lost the art of actually molding that roti, which is done by hand. So this is where, if you see the change in terms of dietary diversity, which has happened because of this cropping system in terms of wheat and rice related to the Green Revolution, has brought in a lot of changes, which also impacted the nutrition and the nutritional conditions, which has led to sort of India being probably now contributing to the global malnutrition burden. And I think that's where we need now to need to look at how we could bring back these crops, which are basically the smart crops we are talking about, and these are climate resilient crops. And if you look at health and agriculture, I think you need to look and understand in the concept of One Health. Because if you look at the health, if you are talking about the health of us, how it was all related to the soil health, the plant health, and then whatever you consume, actually, we are now talking about gut health. And it's not only gut health of human beings, but also of animals. So I think if you look in the context of introducing these climate resilient crops, I think that's where the food system needs to focus on, to see how we could get in these climate resilient crops, which are having less global warming potential. For example, if you look at millets, they have probably 5 times less global warming potential or emissions as compared to wheat and rice. This is well documented. So once you get those into your food system, in your cropping system, I think that's where it's going to impact also the soil, because they need less fertilizers and less water. So you're going to pull out less water from the ground. And all those which have at the present, you see the negative impacts of the current cropping system coming out of wheat and rice could be very well easily addressed, and we could come into sort of sustainable, not only climate resilient, but it would also be gender and nutri-sensitive systems that would actually lead and empower also women, and to see that they are able to take some decisions in terms of how they are able to provide the right type of diverse diet based on these climate resilient crops to their households, to their children. So we have done a lot of studies around this, and I think if we are able to reduce this environmental footprint by introducing these climate and nutri-dense crops, I think that's where we will be able to make a big impact. But then that needs to be sort of supported by right policy interventions. For example, just having a high MSP for millets doesn't work, because we have seen of late there have been high MSP for millets even in compared to wheat and rice, but then people have not, the farmers have not started growing more, which talks of then things like value addition and creating demand pool, where you are actually able to bring in awareness to the consumer and to the industry, and also get into things like how do you mainstream these nutritious crops. I'm not talking about millets only. Along with millets, you have the opportunity to leverage on pulses, which are also equally climate resilient, and then come up with sort of balanced diet. One is that, but beyond that, how do you study them further in terms of the functional traits, functional properties, very important. When you're talking about getting them into the smart protein, alternate protein segment, you're formulating food products, which means you need to understand the varieties and also their functional traits that could be used in various applications, like, for example, an egg alternative or a meat analog. And there lies an opportunity in these varieties of pulses and millets, which can be leveraged not only for their nutritional traits, but also for their functional traits, which is very important. Otherwise, you're not successful in formulating what you want to formulate. Yeah. So I think in summary, I would say these are all interconnected, starting from agriculture, One Health, then coming to nutrition, coming to food science and technology. And most important, if you want to make it sustainable, then ensure that you have a link between agriculture, nutrition, and entrepreneurship. And of course, the smart protein is an umbrella which can be leveraged across. Yeah. So in brief, I think these are my thoughts. Over to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Saikat. Very, very well detailed response, touches on different facets of how we could go about doing this. If I could just come to Mr. Vinay. Vinay, you have been similar to maybe a little bit with Dr. Saikat. You have been working also at the intersection of agriculture and nutrition. And if I could just ask you, and if you could add in a little more, maybe slightly different perspective or additional perspective to what Dr. Saikat just put, what do you think have been the reasons for India continuing to do poor in terms of nutritional indicators, despite being food secure for quite a number of years now? I mean, if you look at the NFHS 5 data, 35.5% of our children continue to be stunted. 32% odd of our children continue to be underweight, and over 19% are wasted. What's causing such a large proportion of young children in India to continue to be malnourished? We have the ration system, the public distribution system, we have the midday meal schemes, but where are we falling short?
Thank you, Arghadeep. There are two things. First, let me talk about a bit of these data. What I mentioned in NHS 5 data, there are, this data was collected in two phases. If you try to understand, in the COVID-19, the first phase completed, and the result was out, and it shows the worsening effect of stunting in many states. If you see the second phase, when it is started, it shows very well development of many states has improved from stunting on these indicators that you just mentioned. So it might be some anomaly with these two times of data collections that happens, and these numbers reflecting in that way. If you see some of the states like Goa, some Kerala, they have increased the stunting growth, like it's a 20% they have increased in NSO4, and now if you see it's become about 5%. So it might be due to the COVID-19. Similarly, it's happened with the Goa itself.
Mr. Vinay, if I could just quickly come in, there's a little bit of disturbance in your voice. Could you just make sure?
Okay. Can you hear me now?
I think it's a little bit better. I think so. Yeah.
Okay. So I was trying to explain about the data that you just mentioned. So there are two sets of data collected that happen in two phases, and that might be a difference on those figures. So just for the information, this is because of this COVID-19 and two phases data collection that happened 2 times. Many states has improved. First phase, it was very good improve. There's worsen effect. Many states was worsen effect on stunting, undernutrition. But second phase shows it's very good improvements. In such way, like if you, for example, in Goa has a very worsen effect in HS4 21% stunting was there. But if the second NHFS 5 shows it 25%. So stunting has increased as well. So this is about the data, the facts. Second thing that you mentioned about still we have several programs. And if you talk about the production system, food securities, though these all programs are there, still these indicators are not improving. So there are many factors. One is we talk about this food securities. There are 3 factors, this accessibility, availability, and affordability. So if you see the availability, that more or less, if you do the production system has gradually increased, there is no doubt the availability of food grain, I would say the food grain production system. But still, if you see this accessibility and affordability, the major challenge that where this food or indicator on food insecurity are not available. And there are many reasons in terms of socioeconomic issues. There are issues with the accessibility is at different level, not only the community level. It's also the household distribution of food item. That is also one of the major challenges of accessibility and having a diverse food item to the individual. So we need to think of those area, how this diversified food, not the food. I would say is the diversified food item available and affordable to the people who are malnourished. Approximately 200 million people are malnourished in India. So how we can reach out to those people, though we have available production system, but those availability and accessibility are still challenges. If you talk about this PDS system, this ICDS program, this particularly social safety net programs for food items, all are there. They're functioning their own silo. There is no connectivity in these 3 the social safety net programs. So we need to bring on the place where all these 3 converge and access in, not only in terms of this availability, like PDS ensuring the diversified food item. It's also to do with the behavioral aspects. How the people can aware about having a diversified food item, minimum the 4 food groups should be eaten by each individuals. So that is the lack of awareness, and also the behavioral aspects include to it. And also it's a different for different culture. And it's take time of changing those behaviors. If you talk in terms of these new developments of other panelists as mentioned, even the smart proteins, there are a lot of challenges on the cultural level, society level to acceptability of those food items. So these are the challenges, but there is a way to address those if we work on different, like these alternatives are there to how to improve this. One of the examples that I can see this one, how we can target the staple food item. Like how biofortification has done a bit, it's just the initiative, but it's still like the aim is to target those last people, or that's the vulnerable people, how we can go through these staple food items, make a nutrient rich those staple food so that it can reach to the vulnerable people. So such kind of thing, a smart protein also play a same role in such a way if we target those staple food items, because those are the population and large number of population that contributing to these malnutritions overall if you see the current under index, also there's a contribution from those populations which are most
Vinay.
vulnerable. Yeah, that is my opinion.
Completely agree with
Thank
you, Vinay. And I like the fact that you brought about accessibility, affordability, because it kind of connects to like very consistent and research that has been happening over the years, beginning from, I would say, Dr. Amartya Sen's work on the Bengal famine to the more recent UN-linked committee on world food security. And this research has consistently shown that hunger and malnutrition is not just caused by lack of food, but there are problems with access, distribution, and power, just like what Vinay just clarified. If you could just now slightly kind of bring the discussion to Dr. Niloo. Ma'am, you have kind of heard our panelists talk about the significant challenges that are kind of cutting across climate change, food security, and nutritional outcomes. And we believe that there is perhaps a need for rethinking not just how we grow the food we eat, but also what we grow. Uh, Dr. Niloo, could you tell us how the Ministry of Science and Technology, and perhaps more specifically the Department of Biotechnology, how they are trying to address nutrition and protein intake concerns through innovative and scientific means? Are there ongoing plans or initiatives that you would like to talk to us about around these themes?
Yeah, very good afternoon to everyone. First of all, I thank for inviting me to this panel. So I hope many of us, you are aware of this, that Department of Biotechnology is one of the ministry which has gone a step ahead and formally recognized the smart protein under one of the thematic areas under its mission program, that is fostering biomanufacturing. So, and we also have constituted a committee which will be steering this initiative of the department, where GFI is our knowledge partner as well. So, as of now, we all understand that India is actually faced with two challenges. That is climate effect of the drastic effects of the climate change, as well as increasing population. We all know that India is one of the most populous country on the earth. So we have to secure the food requirement of the growing population. So we are faced with the twin crisis. So, but we have the potential. India has the capability for frugal innovation, and we are sure that we can handle this, and the smart protein can play a significant role. So that's why the Department of Biotechnology, we have already identified this sector. We already have many brainstorming in this areas. We also had many stakeholder consultations, and we have already identified what are the challenges, what are the solutions which at the ministry and at different levels have to be taken. As Arghadeep and others have pointed out, that this is smart proteins. We have three particular areas, such as plant-based protein, cultivated meat, as well as this precision fermentation. So as you asked me, what we grow is to be identified first, definitely, because we need to focus only on underutilized crop and sources, because we can't be competing with the competing for the arable land for the food supply. So certain suggestions from Department of Biotechnology identified areas. What we say is hemp seed, rice bran, amanat seed, and leaves, moringa leaves. These are some of the very, full of potential, but they have not been utilized fully. So we can explore these for smart protein sector. Crops such as pulses and legumes, cereals, and grasses also. Grasses, one of the Denmark industries at Denmark have shown that grasses can be a very potential source of proteins. Another is we can also utilize the de-oiled cakes from the oil seed. For this, we think that we have to improve. We have to come up with some innovative means so that we can have co-extraction mechanism where we can have these plants fulfill the purpose of oil on the one hand, as well as the proteins from the cake for the smart protein sector. So we have to develop the method for co-extraction from more than one proteins from the two or more sources, along with oil extraction. We also have to enhance the protein content of the plant. We are working on that to increase it by 20 to 30%, and also to enhance the micronutrients such as iron and zinc. by 50 to 100% through crop improvement programs. We also need to have some enhancement of the existing technology with what we have, like we have extrusion technology and other technologies like 3D bioprinting, but we need to improvise, scale up these novel texturization technologies. Then coming to your fermentation technology, fermentation is another very important. I mean, it can be a game changer, though it is a very age-old technology, but this has been used for biofuels and pharmaceuticals. Now we are seeing ways to repurpose it for production of novel foods. So fermentation can be very, very useful because it will not because fermentation, as the panel, everyone understand that it's growing microbes in a bioreactor to come up with some specific kind of products, whether it is flavoring agent or the protein ingredients or anything. So this can be very, very advantageous, that it will not compete with the arable land. And even you can have the production houses in city centers, or maybe the suggestion is the production can also be in industrial zones where the this carbon dioxide, hydrogen, and other inorganic carbon waste from the industries can be utilized. So this can be a very game changer in the area. Then we have cultivated meats, that for which we already have for last 2 decades we have enough of research, but still this is in the nascent stage, as we still have not come up with a certain factors, growth factors, serum free media, which is required to bring down the cost and scale it to the level so that it become affordable for the masses. So there also some innovation and some research, foundational knowledge is required to come up with the animal source free media and some growth factors which are easily, scale up. And again, here microbes can be utilized to produce certain growth factors which can be utilized for the culture media, and we can have. So at Department of Biotechnology, the role is to support these foundational knowledge, support the innovation ecosystem so that the private sectors can build upon it. And this smart protein should reach and realize the promise that it seems to have, not only to secure the food requirement, but also the nutritional requirement, which is very much required for our country, and also for the climate mitigation. So
thank you. Thank you, Dr. Niloo. Really appreciate your detailed response and for explaining the role of the public R&D ecosystem in building the smart protein sector in India. It's very heartwarming to see government bodies like the Ministry of Science and Technology, the Department of Biotechnology, recognizing the tremendous potential smart proteins have when it comes to addressing the food as well as the climate needs as we go into the future. The fact that many other countries in the world as well are prioritizing R&D as well as providing support to scale up manufacturing on smart proteins is a testament, I believe, to the world recognizing APs having a similar effect on food and agri-systems that perhaps electric vehicles had on vehicular emissions. GFI India, like Dr. Niloo said, is a leading think tank and convening body in the alternative protein sector in India, and has been very fortunate to be able to work closely with the DST and DBT in trying to support the R&D efforts, and we hope to keep continuing doing so. Mr. Ashish, if I could quickly come to you, and sorry for the other panelists to keep you waiting. Mr. Ashish, companies like Proeon play a pivotal role, especially when it comes to the plant-based protein supply chains, right? By producing high-quality plant protein ingredients with superior nutrition, functional, and sensory profiles. Could you tell us a little bit about the need that plant-based eggs and meats are trying to fulfill and the market demand for these kind of innovations?
Right. Thanks, Arghadeep. Thanks, the other panelists, for bringing upon very, very important points. And I was noting down few points. So the thing is, as Dr. Niloo pointed out, everything boils down to the competition for arable land, right? So as the global population is increasing, and it is more important for us in Indian context, which we are 1.4 billion people and growing. If we don't do something, most of these arable land will be used for cattle feed, which goes into meat industry. And what then remains is one segment of population, which is with high incomes globally, having access to more and more meat. and a large segment of population, especially in emerging countries like India, having access to calorie-dense foods, such as carb-dense foods, which are cheap, but they are not nutritious. So basically, it will only increase the problem of hunger and malnutrition across the world. So that is not certainly a scenario we want to build, or we want to certainly change in next 10 to 20 years. And now talking about what role smart protein can play, and particularly meat and eggs. So certainly there is a huge scope, and the market trend is different in India and outside India. And being a B2B company, we speak to a lot of consumer brands, a lot of companies in meat, egg, and dairy segment. And the way we have understood the market, so as far as Indian context is concerned, we see that certainly there is potential for these categories, but more important is foods are becoming more and more deficient in key micronutrients such as proteins, and something needs to be done for that. And apart from meat, apart from meat and eggs, there are important other categories such as fortified foods, and there millets can play a very, very important role. And we are again working on one such project where we are trying to upcycle millets, and we are working on various millets, the little millets, foxtail millets, and other millets. We are analyzing the complete nutrition profile and trying to arrive at a very good quality protein, which gives the quality protein which the kind of soy gives, because soy is known to have a very nutritionally good quality protein. And that boils down to the problem, the point of market, because only if there is market, there will be value creation. Everybody will benefit, including the farmers. If you talk about outside India, certainly meat and eggs and dairy, these are huge categories. And particularly at Proeon, we are focusing on egg replacement. And when we talk about egg replacement, while there is this new wave of products which is vegan, people wanting more and more vegan foods, but we feel there is an even larger segment of people where this change is driven by demand supply gap and not just consumer preference. And just to give you example, baking as an industry uses huge amount of eggs, right? And if we take a view of next 10 to 20 years, it is absolutely not possible to create those many eggs which will serve this growing industry. So there is a kind of demand supply gap where certainly there is a need for good sustainable replacement of eggs, mainly on functionality. And we are talking about billions of dollars of huge industry. So there is no dearth of market opportunities if we take various lenses and try to fix these gaps. Of course, things will take time, and only Proeon cannot do it. There have to be multiple interventions. And very, very important is agri-level interventions, because that is where our raw materials start from. And whether it is pulses, whether it is millets, can we talk about, as someone said in the panel, increasing the nutrition content or protein content.
I'm going to come to you, Ashish, on that bit. I would request you hold that point to yourself. I'm going to come to you here on that. But for now, I would like to quickly go to Mr. Prasad. Mr. Prasad, sorry to keep you waiting, but just to hear from you as well. String Bio, for instance, is fast emerging as an important player in the fermentation space in particular, right? Bio is building a portfolio of products for use as agricultural inputs and also for applications in the alternative protein space. Could you tell us about the work that String Bio is doing to provide innovative solutions to issues around agricultural productivity as well as food applications? What is your perception on how fermentation can provide alternatives to conventional animal protein products?
Sure, Arghadeep. Thanks, and thank you for the opportunity to be a part of this panel, and many congratulations to GFI. You've been, facilitating many such events and establishing thought leadership in this area. So, congrats on that. Before I get into what String Bio does, let me start with maybe a couple of contextual points, and some of those have been hit upon by other panelists as well. I think the first is, and often repeated, nevertheless very important, is that as humanity we face the issue of how do we feed our growing population with nutritious, protein-rich, nutrient-rich food for the next 20 years, so the next 40 years, but do so with lesser resources than we do use today. Right? That's the challenge, and given the size and complexity of the the food value chain, that is a very difficult problem. The second contextual point that I'd start with is as everyone knows, there's COP28 that's going on as we speak, and I think about 140 leaders are all gathered there trying to push the climate agenda forward. But you may have heard comments, especially, I mean, even John Kerry mentioned that is that the major focus of this event is on methane, because actually addressing short-term sort of climate emission factors like methane, which have a disproportionate effect on warming and temperature, is the only hope in terms of keeping the pathways to the 1.5 degrees possible. So that's another contextual thing that I wanted to anchor. So it's in this context that we String as a company operates. These are the kind of problems that we look into. We're looking to solve using our patented fermentation technology. So we use methane gas as a feedstock. We brew methane gas to produce our products in a gas fermentation process. So as a result, all the products that come out of our gate are climate positive and carbon negative, straight out of the bat. And using this platform, we've built a set of offerings in the whole agri food value chain. I'll give you a brief insight into some of those. So the first area is in terms of alternative proteins. These are both for human and animal consumption, and using our platform, we are able to create high quality, high protein ingredients which have a footprint of less than 1% of the land and water use of say a plant or an animal alternative. And of course, these are carbon negative. And it's not as if just because it's sustainable, it's not a great product. So these products, we of course validated, not only come with high crude protein levels, but have a very good amino acid profile, digestibility, and they've been validated to provide additional benefits to gut health and immunity. And this is where I reflect on one of the comments made earlier in the panel. It's it takes everything. The problem is so large that it takes everything, and eventually it's a supply demand thing. I mean, if there's a certain requirement for protein, where does that come from? All of these technologies need to come into play in order to solve that problem. And it doesn't stop at just alternative proteins. You need to go back and look at the agricultural piece as well. So in agriculture, for instance, we've developed crop inputs which have fairly interesting benefits at the point of use. I think Reuben mentioned very early in this panel that there are agriculture is also one of the perpetrators. I mean, it's one of the major causes of emissions, and rice for sure is one of the largest emitters. I mean, nearly 10% of methane emissions come from rice. But at the same time, for us as Asians, it's important to our culinary habits, and as our population grows, rice demand is set to increase. So how do you produce more rice while not emitting as much as it does today? And that's the kind of solutions that we want to bring into the mix. So we have a solution which, when applied in the paddy fields, can increase yields by up to 15 to 30%, and thereby help these smallholder farmers in terms of their incomes. But at the same time, it reduces methane emissions by up to 60% and nitrous oxide by 40%. So that it actually makes a significant impact in terms of the climate agenda as well. So to summarize, I mean, this is the kind of impact that innovative fermentation technologies can provide on the agri food value chain, and with many such interventions, I'm pretty confident that we can address the challenges.
Thank you, Mr. Prasad, for bringing that perspective in as well. Aadil, I would now like to quickly go to you. And now that I think we've heard about the technology in some detail from our panelists, as well as the problems, for instance, that we're trying, this technology promises or is trying to promise to ameliorate. I would like to take it at a finance perspective, perhaps from you. And while it's true that, for example, while it's true that venture capitalists, I think, are getting involved with the promising startups in the smart protein space, it's also true that a lot more funds and resources have to come in for the sector to really, achieve its potential. Could you tell us if there's investor appetite and interest for these new types of food that we are calling as smart proteins?
Thanks, Arghadeep, and thanks for having me on. I think the issue with like going last in panels like this is like, that a lot has already been said. And, I think a lot of the points covered, I think particularly like, the speakers before me, Ashish and Prasad, covered some pretty important things that are happening in the space, particularly from, companies' perspective. So to answer your question, I think, as you mentioned, right, like funds are being deployed. And as with, every industry that has kind of been through this before, right, the more information and the more sort of companies that are out there, the more investors automatically end up following, right? As kind of Prasad mentioned, like, he spoke about methane, which has kind of become a really important issue for COP28. And with regards to like smart protein itself, right, I mean, 40% of methane emissions are kind of in some way like coming from animal protein, right? So it's like small things like this that, just the general investor population has previously sort of been unaware of, right? And the increased awareness of these problems, are definitely going to be driving a lot of their decision making, right? Ashish kind of and Dr. Niloo before him, kind of pointed out the importance of resource efficiency as well, right? That's another aspect that has, driven a lot of what investors are seeing their investment thesis being built around. How do we feed a growing population that's expected to hit 10 billion, in a few decades? How do we feed an Indian population with a growing middle class, when incomes are on the rise, right? And people just have higher expectations, they're hoping to kind of feed their families better, right? So when you have a product that can be 7 to 10 times more efficient than in terms of resources than what animal protein currently is, right? I think that is something that is drawing attention, even though people haven't really gone into it right now. It is the basis of a lot of the thesis that are being built, right? I think the second aspect is, and, I think it would be, sort of dismissal of me to not mention AI in some context, but I think that, whether we like it or not, has played a huge role in all of this, right? And, as climate was the case sort of last year, AI is the big buzzword this year, right? And we have already seen that, I'm sure, like both Prasad and Ashish can talk about this, that it is kind of helping companies become more efficient, right? So, in terms of the time taken, in terms of the capital required to come to certain solutions, right? AI has played a role, right? When, companies like Proeon kind of try to figure out the right taste and texture that consumers might be looking for, AI certainly has already kind of made an impact in that field, right? So we're definitely seeing a lot more, like Ashish spoke about a few things, but even this whole acceptance of, plant protein beyond soy, right, is something that people are getting used to and exploring kind of as potential opportunities as well. I think the last thing, that I'd like just point out down that I don't think has been mentioned previously is that India, as well as, sort of the global entire food ecosystem, already has a large number of established companies that have, extremely efficient supply chains, right? And we've seen startups initially kind of try to go out on their own. But the only way we're actually going to solve this problem is if startups like work with these large companies, right? And we've seen that sort of across the world as well as in India as well. So as sort of, startups are kind of plugging themselves into this large ecosystem, as investors are becoming more familiar and comfortable with what's happening, I think it's only natural that we kind of see more capital being, put into the sector. So happy to answer any follow-up questions, but that's my 2 cents. Yeah.
Thanks, Aadil. I think you've answered the question that I had for you very well. I think I'd like to pivot now that we've heard from, like, we've had the first set of responses from all our panelists. I think I would like to pivot slightly to Dr. Saikat that kind of connect my next question to what Ashish was trying to say, actually. around crop optimization and things like that. Dr. Saikat, based on what Ashish was saying and was probably also going to refer, and I'm going to come to him for the next question as well. What do you feel are some of the most important areas of research around, say, seed quality or nutritional content of crops, pre-harvest and post-harvest management practices, as well as other value addition processes that India will have to address to be a leader in the production of plant-based protein ingredients, right? I also have a follow-up question to that, but I think I'll let you answer this one first.
Thank you again. And with respect to smart protein and the crop, I think we have to be very, very careful because we are talking about two aspects here. One is the protein quantity and protein quality, because yield is most important. And of course, beyond that, we are also talking about nutrition. So when we look at the seed, I think seed quality and maintaining seed quality is very important, and understanding what seed quality is all about with respect to these crops. For example, if you look at the seed itself per se, the quality of seed depends on the various agronomic practices followed, especially, for example, if you're looking at the micronutrient content, it is all related to the soil, base soil on which it is grown. And that would directly affect the quality of the seed itself in terms of the micronutrient content, and that gets translated into the grain. Similarly, in case of protein content, which is very important in this case, and especially with respect to different varieties, we're always looking at high protein varieties. But then again, we have seen in our studies that with respect to the fertilizer, so suppose you are giving more of the fertilizer, we have seen that the seed size grows, it becomes bigger, but then there is an inverse relation to the amount of fertilizer and the protein content. So those things need to be understood very critically. Otherwise, you would actually have, if the seed quality is not maintained, then your grain quality gets directly affected. So I think that's one important aspect which we need to understand as we move along in this area, especially with respect to India, because right now you see the problem here, which I think others would also agree, especially the industry. We are trying to import a lot of these protein isolates and concentrates, whereas you have the opportunity right here to leverage on the pulses and millets and do a local sort of production and ecosystem to start producing locally. And to do that, one thing we need to do is, one, I've touched upon the seed quality, but beyond that, you need to also understand what are the potential functional traits which can be leveraged. That's very important, as I also highlighted previously. So at this moment, it is not only nutrition, macro and micronutrients, but also what are the different ingredients which can be mined from these varieties of millets and pulses. And for that, at this moment here at ICRISAT, we have already started working with support of the Department of Science and Technology. We had a project with GFI, and which actually led to the seeding of the thought in terms of predictive modeling. And we have actually advanced in terms of developing models where, based on the nutritional traits, we are able to actually classify different varieties of different crops into different functional traits. And then using those as sort of cues to develop different formulations to actually fast track the product development. So that is another area which requires attention and support in terms of R&D. Recently, we got funding from the Foundation of Food and Agricultural Research, focusing on this predictive modeling for underutilized crops. And I think a lot more work needs to be done, as Madam Srivastava has highlighted, for other crops also. So right now we are focusing on millets and pulses, but definitely this can be leveraged. So I think definitely understanding functionality, the seed quality, and beyond that, getting into actual value addition and validating those products with respect to the control is very important. So that's where I think I'd like to bring the attention not only of the industry, but also different agencies like DBT and DST, where we work together and develop different areas of R&D to see that we are able to support the local development of the local food system to actually produce and supply quality protein and other ingredients based on the local crops. That's very important. The main
Right,
thing
Dr.
is
Saikat.
local climate resilient crops. Thank you so much. Over to you.
Completely agreed. And I think the DST project, I think, is also a good example of work on that front.
Yes.
And I had a second sort of a continuing question, is that you rightly said that there's an very important need to build local value chain systems around agricultural produce. So for the plant-based protein industry, especially, to kind of succeed and get foothold in India, I would also like to get your thoughts on the demand side of the aspect, and kind of ask you, what do you think in specific smart proteins, how smart proteins can address, I would say, the nutritional requirements through these kind of innovations, by creating good quality products? Because if you look at evidences from even programs like the Odisha Millets Mission, which is just a big success in terms of promoting millet production in that state, there have been struggles with the program in terms of promoting the consumption of millets beyond traditionally millet consuming tribal areas. I mean, the uptake, the creating that pull, the demand pull has been a bit challenging for even a successful program like OM. Where do you see smart proteins kind of coming in, filling that gap?
Yeah, I think you're right. There has been various aspects in terms of trying to mainstream millets and pulses. But the challenge has always been that, is the consumer accepting it? So for us and our experience at ECRISAT here, we have realized that unless we work with the consumer segment and understand what the consumer is actually going to accept, that's something which is very important. So you cannot bring a product, say, from Singapore and expect the Indian population to accept it. So let's work locally and try to understand what is that the consumer is going to accept in terms of the product. Coming to smart protein per se, I think, as you talked about success in terms of nutrition and impact, I think there's a big opportunity here, because if you look at things like millet missions, they have sort of pushed millets in various formats. But then are they sort of designed to in a manner that if you want to give it to a child and make an impact in terms of, say, addressing iron deficiency, or also addressing growth factors like stunting and wasting, are those products being designed in a manner that they are easily digestible? Do they have the right PTCAS value? Do they have the right bioavailability? Have anti-nutrient factors been taken care of that in the product development? So I think as I look at the smart protein segment, there is a very well-structured approach in designing the products. And I think as we integrate more of that into this segment and understand the segment, that's where the opportunity lies to actually design specific products for specific consumer segments. And that will make also the opportunity to ensure that various ingredients, locally available ingredients, are actually sort of worked upon. So it's not just taking a millet and converting into and adding it to a smart protein product, but also doing the sort of work in terms of modifying their functionality. So you could actually extract a protein, but find, okay, the functionality is not good enough in terms of certain parameters, but then modify it and then use it in product development and deliver exactly what you want to the consumer. So I think, yes, food science and technology, along with agriculture, we talked about seed quality, and then finally the marketing aspects and understanding consumer behavior is very important. You cannot say eat millets and change everything in a day. So that consumer behavior and making the product more affordable, easily sort of consumable, I think convenience is something which we need to focus on. So I hope that answers the question.
Yes, that does. Thank you so much, Dr. Saikat. Very, very good response. Dr. Kunwar, I would kind of slightly continue the conversation about building local ecosystems of smart protein ingredients in the country. Dr. Kunwar, I would like to hear thoughts on the fact that while India is the largest producer of pulses and is also one of the major producers of soybeans globally, we're still somewhat reliant on imports, right? I mean, if you look at the numbers, India imported around 25 lakh tons of pulses and about 5 lakh tons of soybean for 2022-23. So if you want to build a local industry around these kind of ingredients for smart proteins, what do you feel are some of the measures that we can take to significantly increase the production of these crops and not just be self-sufficient to the point of conventional consumption, but also have that sufficient surplus to build a smart protein industry around it?
Yeah, of course, as you rightly told about this pulses, and in particular reference to the soybean, if you see, the last 7-8 years, we have increased this pulse production by more than 60%. In 2015-16, it was hardly 16 million tons from 13 million hectares. And now we are producing 27 million tons. Similarly, if you look the soybean also, we are the 5th largest producer in the world of the soybean. And by raising 12.5 million hectares, we are producing 15 million tons. But if you look the pattern, how it is being utilized in India, these both are the very important sources of protein. Talk about the other pulses or the soybean. Soybean is also basically a leguminous crop. But you see the pattern, how we are utilizing the soybean. 93% of our de-oiled cake is going as a cattle feed or as the poultry feed, or nowadays fisheries, or also they are using as a feed for the fisheries. So only 7% is being used for the human consumption. So that is very irony of the system, because we look the content of the protein out of all these pulse crops, they hardly have 20 to 25% protein. Soybean is the one crop which provide you 40% proteins. Quality wise also it is one of the best proteins. Either you talk about the amino acid profiling or its digestibility or from molecular structure also, functionality also. So this is a very viable and one of the best options to use soybean meal or the de-oiled cake for making the different kind of what you are talking about, the smart proteins. And if you see, you are talking about the imports, you see the demand actually, these are the very elastic in terms of the edible oils as well as in case of protein products also. When the income increases, the demand also increases. So in that way, we will be importing, but our progress has been certainly significant in both cases. You see, I would just like to mention again about the case of soybean. In 1970, we have hardly 10,000 quintal production in this country. Today, we are producing 15 million tons. So amazing the progress what we have made. And still, you see the potential in the research experiments. Our yield is more than 2 tons, but the national average is less than 12 quintals. So there is a huge gap, and that gap can be filled. So by our measures, what we can done in this crop, we expect that by 2030, we would be able to produce almost 24-25 million tons of the soybean. And now at this time, earlier you see the soya meal was being exported on a very large scale. But now due to the fulfilling our demand, the domestic demand which is coming from the poultry industry, its consumption, its domestic consumption actually has been increased, so our export has declined. Still in 22-23, 1.3 million tons of the de-oiled cake was exported. So those are the raw material available for the industry. Now it is the industry who has to come forward, who has to invest the money in this soybean particularly, so they can use this kind of products, the already available products, and they can go for the smart protein type of the products. And not only in this, Dr. Niloo Srivastava, he rightly told about that many kind of these oil seed crops, in all crops, not only in the soybean, in the brassica also, in the groundnut also, meals are just being used either as a cattle feed or on a very small scale in the confectionery and different kind of products. So these are the sources already available. As far as the pulses are concerned, I don't think that because our domestic demands, we are not only the largest producer, but at the same time, largest consumer also. So the demand will remain there, and the surplus of the pulses for going such kind of industry will be, but I hope that there are the very few chances for that. But the crops like soybean, like other brassica crops, mustard, and the groundnut, there you can find a lot of quantity which is available, which can be transformed, can be processed as in smart protein. So I hope that we have the potential.
Thank you, Dr. Kunwar Singh. I think you've kind of hit the nail on its head and kind of very succinctly put forward what are some of the opportunities that are kind of immediately available. And yes, there would be future opportunities, I believe, perhaps in terms of pulses as well. But the immediate opportunities around oil seeds, I think you've kind of very nicely highlighted that. It's also perhaps worth mentioning that from an agricultural perspective, that many of the crops that Dr. Singh just mentioned, be it pulses or even soybeans, most of them are leguminous crops that could be that are also nitrogen fixing legumes, by the way.
Right.
And wider adoption of these crops also deliver environmental and economic benefits through improved soil fertility and reducing fertilizer use.
Sure.
Yeah. Mr. Prasad, if I could come to you, and this is kind of continuing from about the potential of the fermentation technology. As one of the pioneers in that space, what is your opinion on the opportunity that agricultural side streams present? I mean, I think Dr. Singh just mentioned about agricultural byproducts, and because of being such a large agrarian country, we have a lot of agricultural waste and byproducts that are kind of generated by the country. Biomass fermentation, for example, can use this vast quantity of agricultural waste as feedstock for production of single cell proteins. How big do you feel is this opportunity, and what are the challenges perhaps preventing India from capitalizing on this?
Yeah, I certainly think that the scale of the feedstock is very large, and the opportunity is large. On paper, definitely it's very large. The way I look at it is, the notion is slightly different. So given this kind of stress that our agricultural ecosystem is under, and the demands on it, I think it's an imperative that we utilize all streams, all byproducts to its fullest. So, and that is a necessity. So, and this necessity will drive innovation, and that's how I look at it. The reason I said on paper is that in my experience, when we say something is waste, and then in my project experience where I've looked at oils, or where I've looked at from a biofuels point of view, when you sometimes think of something as waste, there's often someone using it for something, right? So in India, we actually, compared to the West, we tend to waste very little. So in the end, I think it becomes a question of what approach gives the best value addition to these streams. Because we have a history of using waste streams in fermentation. Molasses is a prime example, right? We are one of the largest molasses-based alcohol producers, and that's a byproduct or a side stream of the sugar industry. Biogas production is also fairly established. So the concept exists, and it exists in some cases at scale. So the question though is, where is the most value created from this resource? Is it through making proteins? Is it by making fuel? What are the government policies and frameworks that will drive that? I think the market will determine that over the next many years. Technologically, intuitively, I think fermentation will play a very crucial role in this area because of the nature of the feedstock, the kind of opportunities that we would likely be looking at. From a challenge perspective, I'll keep the government policy and other issues aside. Focusing on again from my project experience, I'd say that the key challenges are threefold. First is logistics. Fermentation, as we all know, is a very capital intensive process, and generally we deliver value when we do things at scale. But in the case of side streams, agro waste, etc., the scale brings the issue of collecting these waste streams from a large catchment area, and that tends to be a problem, especially in biofuels. That was definitely one of the key bottlenecks. So either we solve that logistics problem, or technologically we enable something that is enabled to be commercially viable at very small scale, very dispersed. Distribution of technology. One way or the other, that problem needs to be solved. The second thing is around variability. Fermentation is also a very sensitive process, and I think all artists of fermentation will acknowledge that. And very, slight changes in feedstock can have a very disproportionate impact on the process. So these streams by their nature are diverse, a lot of variability. And so addressing those kind of issues are significant technology problems to solve. And I think the third is cost, because the moment there is a use for a waste stream, automatically the cost of that stream starts to go up. I mean, we've seen this time and again, be it in municipal waste or a lot of the waste streams. The moment that people realize that there is value in it, obviously the expectations and the costs go up. So the value addition, and that's where I come back to the value addition, and the opportunity taken has to be strong enough to be able to do that. So having said these are challenges that I think we have the skills and the capability to solve as a society. And I'm sure we'll be able to leverage all of these sites. Look at that as an opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Prasad, for bringing that perspective. I think you said that you're not going to touch upon the government side of things in your point, and for that, I think I'm going to go to Dr. Niloo so that she can touch upon those points. Dr. Niloo, now that you've heard from all the stakeholders in the agriculture sector, as well as startups like String Bio and Proeon and so on, as well as VCs with Aadil here, what do you feel is the role of public investment and public support, as in government investment, government support, boost R&D in these kind of areas? And where do you feel smart proteins, products like smart proteins can kind of really cater to our climate as well as food emergencies that we're going to face in the future?
I fully agree. I mean, waste, as my colleague said, colleague panelist said, waste is actually not a waste unless and until we waste it. So in a smart protein, we actually are looking into the circular economy kind of thing, where we are trying to have no waste system generated and have a kind of value out of those. Everything, every buy stream gets utilized, and we get value out of every at every steps. So having said that, public funding, I fully agree. Public investment is very much required, because government support at the level of creating an ecosystem and also providing the necessary I must say that there are requirement of necessary infrastructure support in certain segments, whereas initially, so there the public investment, the government support, and also the policy regulations aspects, so that the stakeholders have the confidence in moving ahead in this area. So that is where the government has to play a very key role. And I will let you know that the committee that we have constituted, we have put FSSI on board. And with FSSI on board, we are very much confident that as we move ahead, the regulatory pathways will be hassle-free for all these alternative protein areas, whether it is novel food. Plant protein may not have so much of issue, but definitely the fermentation or the cultivated, as we move ahead, will have to have a policy regulatory approaches from the government side. So keeping all those in mind, this committee that Department of Biotechnology has constituted already has FSSI as a on-board member. So as we move ahead, we feel that that should give us the results. Yeah. And secondly, with Department of Biotechnology is also as an advisory giving. Earlier, there was a board of nutrition, National Nutrition Board with Women and Child Development. So now it is Niti Aayog, which is now steering the nutritional strategy for the country. But Department of Biotechnology, as and when needed, we are providing the advisory with respect to the nutritional requirement and nutritional need for the population, and where the interventions have to be done. So at DBT, we are not only supporting the R&D, the basic level, the regulatory and policy, we are helping in shaping up the right policy and regulation, and also we are giving advisory at different level of nutritional the inputs to the government, different arms of the government, so that this sector is developed in total, in holistic way, and India can become
Yeah.
a leader, I must say, in smart protein manufacturing.
Thank you, Dr. Niloo, for putting it in such a positive and hopeful manner. We really all hope the same. Aadil, I'm going to come quickly to you, and thank you for being so patient. Our panelists have been very detailed in the response, and we really appreciate the insights they're bringing. And we have been a little bit behind time for that, but I think we are all appreciative of the fact that everyone's bringing in very unique understanding into the conversations. Other the typical VC approach is perhaps not the right fit for startups in this space, right? I mean, as an example, if you see, because there's a lot of these technologies in the smart protein space at this point of time are a little bit in their R&D phase, for example. And if you compare it with, say, the clean energy and the electronic vehicle industry, the government there had a big role to play in ensuring that sufficient funds flows into the clean energy and EV tech sector when it was kind of also at a very early curve in its journey. What support do you feel the venture capitalist and the startup ecosystem would require from the government to bring in and mobilize more private capital to be a little more patient and interested in the smart protein sector? What can the government do to kind of support that?
Sure. Thanks for the question. So I think honestly, what kind of differentiated the EV and I think the energy sector apart is, I think India, for kind of everything that it was going through, energy has kind of always been on the forefront of our policies because we're traditionally have been an energy importing country, right? Food is of course a lot different, right? But I think as kind of Dr. Niloo mentioned, right, the government has already started to do a number of things to kind of make sure that the process is getting streamlined. We've already seen, a number of government initiatives. I think going way back, like 2014 was when the Sustainable Agriculture, right, mission was launched. And, of course, since then you've had like folks like GFI that have, come up with a number of initiatives as well that have directly or indirectly kind of worked with the government. So I do think that there are already a number of initiatives out there. What we can do is, sort of take an example of what some of the countries globally have been doing, right? Singapore, Netherlands in particular, right, have all launched initiatives either through the government directly or through, setting up government funds or, which have kind of led to, adoption of, smart protein in general, kind of across the board, as well as from a consumer angle. But I also think that another thing that sort of can be done is that India traditionally has not had a precedent for what the smart protein sector is sort of going through right now, right? But as you have kind of cultivated meat, getting these regulatory approvals in the US and global sort of precedents being set, I think India is definitely like also learning from them. So what the government just needs to do, and honestly, it's been doing a lot of things right, but what it just needs to do is sort of speed up the decision-making process, right? Bureaucracy in India is slow. We all know that. And to be honest, like I mean, it's something that we understand, right? I mean, every time I learn more about the government, the more I'm amazed that, wow, as big of a country as we are, we're functioning in a very beautiful manner. But, that's something that I know that a lot of entrepreneurs particularly have sort of struggled with getting regulatory approval outside of, the plant protein space, as was mentioned earlier. So honestly, the only thing that really needs to change is for this, sort of acceleration of government approval on certain things. And I think that itself will make a huge difference, right? I think, like I was saying earlier, like the capital is coming, right? The infrastructure is there. We have a huge infrastructure that was, kind of set up for, the medical industry that can also be applied to ordinary proteins. So it's only a matter of sort of accelerating the decision making and the processes in place that can make a difference. Right?
Thanks, Aadil. Thanks for saying that out loud. That what the government perhaps can do a little bit more. I think I'm going to quickly go to Reuben now. We are a little late on time, so I think if we can be a little brief in keep making sure that we don't delay too much. Reuben, if I could just quickly go to you and bring the conversation slightly back to agricultural sustainability. What do you feel could be some of the measures that the agriculture and livestock sector could take to promote climate change adaptation? I mean, clearly, from conversations and from the data, it's kind of clear that going towards the industrial farming systems of the West is not the solution, given the environmental footprint are now clear from what stems from those kind of systems. How can we safeguard the sector from not just an yield perspective, but also from ensuring that, like you said, the contributions to climate change are also reduced and we're able to safeguard our natural resources? Where do you see smart proteins come in helping do all of that?
Sure, Arghadeep. So on this, let me just put it in the context of what India already has in place. Obviously, you have your national mission on sustainable agriculture as one of the missions under the National Action Plan for Climate Change. So, and we already do see, different sort of actions and programmatic interventions, whether it be policy reforms that have, promoted more climate change sort of adaptation and mitigation strategies within agricultural policies. But also the UN Food Systems Summit that really brought out the need for a food systems transformation and the countries to actually have strategies for this transformation. So with this background, one of those things is what we usually see, and I'm looking from the deep lens or the lens that I come from, is that and also speaking towards smart proteins, is that agriculture policy and planning usually has been focused on yield per hectare, a very siloed approach, and there's that need to adopt more of a holistic approach, and that's where we bring in trying to reveal the hidden costs of nature, so to nature of food production systems. And one of those things is when you actually take into account the true value of food production, that's where also this whole debate on smart proteins can come in terms of it's not only about your yields, but also in terms of your natural resources, whether it be your water footprint, whether it be your carbon footprint, use of arable land. And most of our panelists have already spoken very elaborately on, how much, the livestock sector actually kind of takes up in terms of arable land. So I think to actually reveal the true costs, we need more assessments in this direction. I think, the Frontiers 2023 report, one of the UNEP's flagship reports, is soon going to be out, and GFI has a lot of evidence, as one of the authors on that report, has a lot of evidence that to actually, switch or transition over to maybe scaling systems for smart proteins. So I think that that's something that we would need to do more of, make that economic case also for that shift, and then see how it can be mainstreamed into policy. So with that, I think I'll just keep it very short and pass it back to you.
Yeah. Thank you, Reuben. I think I would like to kind of come to my last question to the panelists. Vinay, this is for you, and you can answer it briefly. Now that we have heard from all the panelists and from your own experience of working on climate smart agriculture in India and Asia, from what you have seen and understood and heard from everyone, do you believe that despite the ongoing conventional efforts of improving sustainability and production of food, etc., I think that the innovations like smart protein will have a key role to play, nonetheless, if we meet the food and nutrition demand for a ever-growing population. Oh, okay. I think Mr. Vinay has dropped out.
I think yes, Vinay has dropped out.
Yeah. All right. No problem. I think that was anyway the last question of the panel. We can perhaps, it's a little late, so I don't think we would be able to wait. But I would like to thank all the panelists first, and maybe quickly see what are some of the questions that have come in. We have a few questions that can be answered by our panelists. I think I'll start with maybe someone. This is from Shia, but she's not mentioned the panelist she is directing it to. I'm still going to read the question, and if someone likes to take it up, please feel free to take it up. Shriya's question is, how can small and marginal farmers benefit through this program? And by program, I'm assuming smart proteins. She's talking about that. And what are some of the crops that a small farmer can grow to improve their livelihood? I think this is kind of probably open to all the panelists if anyone wants to take it. Two questions. How can small and marginal farmer benefit through this program? And what are all the value-added crops a small farmer can grow to improve their livelihoods? If anyone, Ashish, if you would like to take it, or Dr. Saikat, if you would like to take it.
Sure. So I think when we are talking about the crops and the small and marginal farmers, definitely we're not talking about farmers growing rice and wheat. So we are going to talk about alternate crops and alternate products. And direct impact is that as we create demand pool, the farmers definitely will start growing and their additional livelihood opportunities will come in. So I think that's the direct impact that the farmers will have by actually getting what we say is inclusive in the value chain and market oriented. I think that's the direct impact of what we are talking about. Yeah. Over to you. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Saikat. Perhaps we can take one last question. I think there's someone who had a question for Mr. Prasad. Prasad, if you could take this question, which is around, please tell me the constraints for the farmers facing in rearing of bovine animals, especially with access to feed and fodder. What are the different fodder varieties available to reduce enteric fermentation? I'm not sure if this is very applicable to you.
It's not really. I'm not the expert on dairying of bovine animals because I think my access is more on the feed side. But again, I don't deal a lot with ruminant animals. But I can just maybe briefly address the second part of the question on the enteric fermentation. It's a challenging sort of area. Despite our solutions of reducing methane in rice, we've actually tried this in bovine, and we've not yet found success. There are certain additives, be it seaweed extracts, or there are certain lipids. There are certain actives that have come into the market and have shown various degrees of propensity to reduce methane from enteric fermentation in bovine animals. So I mean, those are things that can be tried out, but that's I think I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, thanks, Prasad. Dr. Niloo, I'm going to have, this is a question specifically for you, so I'm going to take that. So someone's asking, how is the DBT helping entrepreneurs to bring fermentation technologies in market for precision fermentation?
See, as I have told recently what initiative we have taken, but other than that also, previously through BIREC and through DBT, we have funded a few of the projects pertaining to these areas. Like we have also a BIREC, which is an arm of DBT, which supports entrepreneurs at different level, from a startup to from ideation to validation and to commercialization. We have different schemes at BIREC where you can apply, and we do support at every step in different manner. And at DBT, we support for the R&D, and we already have supported for cultivated meat standardization of culture protocols. We have supported for edible scaffold to the, I'll not name the companies, but we have supported various companies. I think Spring Bio also was supported by DBT for this developing a pilot plant for methane utilization. So this way already DBT has been doing in the area, but this is now first time that we have formalized and we have focused our all efforts towards strengthening the smart protein R&D and the ecosystem and the policies, so that this sooner the India should take lead in this sector. So otherwise also, but this is a focused approach now in this year that we have recently taken.
Thank you, Dr. Niloo. Well, I think with that, I would like to thank all the panelists for your valuable time and contribution to this discussion. Thank you so much for taking the time to do this. And I know we are probably a little over time, but a big thank you for all the patience. And thanks to the audience members as well who tuned in and stayed intact throughout the discussion. If I could quickly round off today's panel, I think it's perhaps safe to say, and we kind of agreed on a consensus that an ever-growing population and an increasing demand for protein-rich, tasty food will be a big challenge to meet in the future. The path forward for smart proteins, I believe, would be to address some of these challenges around accessibility, cultural acceptance, consumer behavior, and so on. But if we work on improving the alternatives by also perhaps focusing on staple food items and making them something that they would really like to involve in their daily diet, that would be a big win for smart proteins. India, with its unique strengths, stands to benefit from this transition and from this need. I would say climate will force people to move towards more sustainable food choices. That is perhaps more likely to happen in the West. And India, I think, can really plug in that gap and become that global supplier, if I could just say that. I think just like India has emerged as a leader in the supply of pharmaceuticals and vaccines, there's a very real chance of something similar happening perhaps with alternative proteins. I think the right question to ask would be whether India is able to capitalize on that opportunity. And with that, I think on a hopeful note, I would like to close the panel. Thank you, everyone, and goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Arghadeep.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks. Bye.